We continue now at the top of Daf Zayin and Beis in Meseches Babba Kamma. This is Babba Kamma Daf 87b. On the previous summit, Rabbi Elazar asked Rav, if a person injures a girl that's a minor, does the money go to the father? And the Gemara says that Rav answers, Amar Le, he said back to him, Lo zachsa Torah liav, ela shevach neurim bilvad. The Torah did not give to the father only the profits of her youth, meaning only the kesef kiddushin, etc., but he is not going to get the money from that injury. And the Gemara continues, Esrei, we have a question on this answer from the Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Hachovel be'evid ivri, if somebody injures an evid ivri, chayav bekulin, he's chayav to pay all 5 of the payments, chutz min hasheves bisman shu shelo, except for the sheves payment when he owns the evid ivri, because the earnings, they belong to the master. And the same thing should be true over here. The earnings of the daughter who's a minor, they belong to her father, and therefore he should be entitled to this payment in a situation where the girl is injured. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaya says, Mo de Rav b'sheves. Rav would actually admit by sheves that actually does go to the father. Because her earnings until the time she's a bogeres, until the time she's an adult, that actually belongs to her father, so that the father actually would collect. And Rashi explains, Min hasheves bizman sho'evet shalo, he's pater from sheves if he owns the evid ivri. V'lo be'evid acher, now if he doesn't own the evid ivri, he's not pater from sheves. The no sin shiftel rabbo, then he would give the sheves to the master of the evid ivri. Katani mihas, nevertheless, what does it say over here? The evid ivri shalo pater, that by his evid ivri he's pater. Ho'olu ma'aseh yadav shalo, since the earnings go to him. V'achanami, the same should be true by the daughter, by the young girl who's injured. Kevon debito ma'aseh yadeha shalo, since when it comes to a minor daughter, so her earnings go to the father. Lishkol sheves dida, so he should be able to collect her sheves. The kashal Rav, and that's difficult to Rav. Diamar lo zichsa Torah la'av ela shevach neurim bilvad, because Rav said that the father is only entitled to the profits of her youth. Devada afilu chavlo zichsa lo, but that shouldn't be the case. Even when it comes to the payment for injuries, that also should go to the father. And the Gemara said, Mo de Rav b'sheves, that Rav actually would admit by sheves, tiyavinon le'la'av, that Rav would admit would go to the father. And the Gemara continues, Esrei, we have a question from the following Braisa, Hachovel bivno gadol, if somebody injures his adult son, yitin lo miyad, so he has to pay him immediately. Bivno katan, if he injures his son who's a minor, yasalo segula, so he should take the money and invest it on the son's behalf, that way it will be able to be paid out in the future. And Hachovel bivito katan, if he injures his daughter who's a minor, pater, he's pater, v'lo, not only that, el acherim shechavlu ba, if others injure her, chayavin litain liavia, so they have to pay the father. And so you see again, this is a question for Rav. It seems like the money for the injury goes to the father, not to her. And the Gemara answers, Hachanami, here also b'sheves, we're talking specifically about the sheves payment, as we said above. Rav would admit by sheves that goes to the father. And Rashi explains, Bivno, by his son, Lo zachile rachman amidi. So there the father gets nothing in terms of his son. Avol bevito katana, but when it comes to his daughter who's a minor, zachile, there the father is entitled, as we explained. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots, Uvivno gadol yitin lo miyad. It says that by his son, again we said by the adult son, if he injures him, he has to pay him right away. Is that really true that he has to pay him right away? Or aminu, we have the following contradiction. Hachovel bivanav uvivnosav shalacherim. If somebody injures the children of others, the sons and daughters of others, gedolim yitin lahem miyad, if they're adults, you have to pay them immediately. Ketanim, if they're minors, yasalem segula, again you make an investment on their behalf. Bivanav uvivnosav shalo, with his sons or with his daughters, so pater, so in that case he's going to be pater. And so we see over here that by his own children, he's actually pater. And the Gemara says, Amri, the sages say to that, they answer, Lokasha, it's not difficult. Kan kishasmuchim al shulchanu. In one case, we're talking where they rely on his table, meaning in a situation where you have adult children, a person has his own adult children and he injures them, but these adult children rely on him for sustenance, so then he actually is pater. But kan kishein smuchin al shulchanu. But here, when they're not relying on him, that's the case where we say, Hachovel bivno gadol, so you have to pay him immediately. And the Gemara says, but how could you say that this first case where you're paying the beno gadol, you're paying him immediately, it's talking about a son who's not relying on the father? If so, if that's the case, let's look at the end of that brisa. It says that if he injures his daughter who's a minor, he's pater. And not only that, that if others injure her, so then they need to pay her father. And so the question is, if we're talking about a girl who's a minor but who supports herself, so don't they have to pay her to buy mizoni, because she requires mizonos, she's going to need this for her sustenance. Now, even according to the one who says that a master can tell his slave, you need to work for me, but I will not support you. So hani mili be'eved kanani, that's true by an eved kanani. Diyamar le, where the master can say to him, to the eved, avid avidata kula yomi, you should work all day. Ula orsa zil sachar v'yechol, and at night you should go around and beg and eat. Aval Eved Ivri, but let's say when it comes to an Eved Ivri, to a Jewish slave, Tichsiv, where it's written in the pasuk Kitov lo imach, that he has to be good with you, imcha b'maichel, with you in eating, imcha b'mishta, with you in drinking. So there we don't say that. There your person's not allowed to say Ase imi veini zoncha, and kol shekain bitu, and that would certainly be true by his daughter. He can't say Ase imi veini zoncha, and so therefore, if she's supporting herself, she should be entitled. She should be the one to collect. And the Gemara says, Kida Amar Rava Bereder Rav Ula, it's like Rava, the son of Rav Ula, said, he said in a different context, Lo nitzrucha el lahadafa, that it's necessary in a situation where she already has enough to provide for herself, and now there is extra. That extra amount, that would go to the father. Hachanami lo nitzrucha el lahadafa. Over here also, we'll say the same thing. We're talking about that which is extra beyond what she needs for her sustenance, that would go to her father. But the Gemara continues, how can you say that the later brisa that we brought, that it's talking about children who rely on the table of their father, and that's why we said that if the person injures his own children who are smuchan al shulchano, so he's pater, but the problem then is if he injures the children of others, and those children are relying on their father, so how does the brisa make sense? The brisa said, Gedolim yitan lehem miyad, it said that if they're adult children, you have to pay them immediately, and ketanim yasa lehem segula, and by the children that are minors, you make an investment for them. But why are the children the ones being paid? Liavim boy lemisa, you should give it to their father because they're relying on the father. And the Gemara says to that, Amri the sage's answer, Kika kapid, when is the father strict? Meaning to say, when is the father going to say that since they're relying on me, therefore I'm entitled? B'midi de kachaser, that's in a situation where he's going to lose out. So for example, if he's the one that caused the injury, then he'll say, since you're relying on me, I want to be exempt. However, b'midi de asa me'alma, but if it's something that's coming in from the outside, meaning somebody else injures his children, and those children happen to be relying on him, they're supported by him, but there he's not makvid, there he says the children are entitled to collect themselves. Lo kapid, there he's not going to be makvid, and that's why the payment goes to the children in that situation. But the Gemara continues, but what about lost items? Let's say they find something, the me'alma kasilu, that they're getting that from the outside. The kakapid, and there we actually say that he is makvid, that it actually should go to the father. And the Gemara says, Amri, they answer to that, Revacha de kasilu me'alma, veleslu tsara de gufayu begava kapid. If it's some kind of profit that comes from the outside and there's no pain for them, it's something that they just happen to find, so then he's makvid, then he actually wants that. Aval chavala, but when it comes to an injury, the islahu tsara de gufayu, where they're already being injured, they have pain in their body, and it's coming to them from the outside, lo kapit, he's not strict about that. There he says the payment can go to them. But the Gemara continues, Vahasam, but what about there in the first brisa, the Islat Sarah de Gufa, there when we talked about the girl who was a minor who was being injured, she does have pain in her body, and the money is coming from the outside, the kakapit, and there we say that he actually is makbid, the father does want to collect the money, the katani, because it said in the first brisa, not only that, that if others injure her, again, this girl that's a minor, so they have to pay her father. But in this case, again, if we're going to say that the money's from the outside and she suffered injury, she should get the money, so why is he getting the money in the first brisa? And the Gemara says, Amri, the sages say to that, Hasam over there, the Gavra Kapdonahu, there we're talking about a person who's strict in general. Because as we just said, that first brisa is talking about children who don't rely on the table of the father, he doesn't want to provide for them. So with that kind of a father, even with money coming from the outside, he is strict, he wants that money. But over here in the later brisa, the Lav Gavra Kaptana, who we're not talking about a strict father, because they do rely on him to provide. So when is he strict? He's strict if it's causing him a loss of money. But something that comes from the outside, lo kapit, he is not going to be strict. And we'll take a look at Rashi, Vayre. What about a lost object that the children find? We learned in the Mishnah Shnai Mochzin, if his son or daughter who are minors, if they find something, so that belongs to him. We say over there also that if the children are adults and they're relying on the father, that's also considered a katan, and he gets those. Why does he get it if it's coming from the outside? And again, the Gemara said there, since the children suffered no injury, that's why the money goes to the father. And the Gemara continues, Mai Sagula, what does it mean that we make an investment on behalf of the child who's a minor? Rav Chisda says, Sefer Torah, that's referring to buying a Sefer Torah for that child. Rabba bar Rav Huna says, Dikla, it refers to a palm tree, Da'achal minei tamri, that is able to eat from it the dates. And the Gemara continues, V'chein amar Reish Lakish. Similarly, Reish Lakish says, Lo zachsa Torah liyav ela shvach neurim bilvad. When the Torah gives the father rights to the property of the daughter who's a minor, it's talking specifically about the profits of her youth and nothing else. He's not entitled again to, let's say, the money from her injuries. Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu pitzia. It applies even to wounds. The Gemara says, Pitzia sal kadaytzich. Do you think he's even able to collect from wounds? Afilu Rabbi Lazar lo kamiboyle ela chavala. Even Rabbi Lazar, he was only asking the question if the father gets the money from injuries, where it actually lessens her value. He wasn't asking about pitzia. He wasn't asking about wounds that don't lessen her value. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Peiches Amud Aleph.